From the City of Angels, you're listening to the James Salazar Media Podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the political spectrum. So let me strike the music and I'll meet you on the other side.
Engage.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Say hello to my little friend.
No, I am the father.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody.
What's up, savages, and what's up, my fellow Americans, and welcome to the James Salazar Media Podcast, where you get your weekly dose of pop culture, politics, and futurism. I am your host, the formerly mentioned James Salazar, aka the media, the new media, the true media. You know, all the news sources are opinionated news, and if that's the qualification, if that's the standard for being the media, then James Salazar is a part of the media. So take that, fake news. But I digress. So things have been getting crazy, right? We've taken this moment of solidarity and unity, and we let politics cram in and start to divide us. Everybody was on board for refurbishing, having a greater eye and greater responsibility expected from the police forces. You know, some police and their hiring methods have led to bad employees who can't handle the stress of someone who might be getting in their face and may not be saying the things that they want to hear, but they're not breaking the law. But they get angry and they want to abuse their authority and hurt that person. Well, that's not their right, and it's against the law. And this mentality, this entitlement mentality that they don't have to be respectful to human life, where they have forgotten that they work for us. And they exist at our pleasure. They're supposed to serve and protect us, not be the apparatus of fear and intimidation. They're supposed to maintain our constitutional rights. And their job is to de-escalate, not get offended and break the law. This is common sense. We were all on the same page. But then politics came in. Groups like Antifa and Black Lives Matter and even far-right racist groups started to divide us with their thinking by saying all cops are bad. We need to defund the police. The genocide committed by the cops on black people. These lies are now problematic and statistically untrue. I know they feel true. And if you were going to take the media at its word, they are invested that you think is true. Because unrest leads to high viewership rates. That's for sure. If it don't bleed, it doesn't lead. Nobody wants to see a story where a husband and wife are acting nice to each other. We watch reality shows based on people acting dysfunctional. That's what people like to see. Makes them feel better about themselves. But if that's all you see on television, that's all you see on the news, it can create social unrest. And if we could focus and unify under the problem that we are dealing with now and not use the opportunity to implement other political ideas that our country are divided upon, it doesn't help. And I wish we could unify. But now ideas under the banner of George Floyd's death and the injustice of that, people are bringing in other subjects that are not as unifying issues, that are not unifying issues. So let's address them. And they need to be addressed. Because some of the things that people are suggesting in this moment of change will be destructive for our society, clearly. But they are emotional based ideas and they feel right. Doesn't mean they're going to produce the results that they want. Black Lives Matter missed an opportunity to be a mainstream political group because they were clearly for the injustice of police brutality. But their leftist ideology couldn't stay in check. They could have made grounds and put them in a better position outside of George Floyd incident and started implementing their left ideas that way. But no, they wanted to push everything at the same time. All these leftist ideas that America would never do. You know, they're equating the injustices of what happened to George to capitalism. Let me tell you something. Police brutality happens in every political system. And everybody who's educated knows that. Under communist, socialist, capitalistic, totalitarian authorities that abuses their power is part of the human condition, not a political system. If you give people power without checks, they will abuse their power. This is obvious. But they're saying statements that are untrue, which can lead to the death of more black people. They said that the police department are committing genocide on black people. Statistically, this is untrue. We know this to be untrue. In 2000, and just look at the numbers. In 2019, in the whole country of 350 million people, that's not counting undocumented people. Out of 350 million people, there's been hundreds of thousands of interactions with cops. And only 1,000 people were killed by cops. Out of 350 million. One is too much, but it's not a genocide. And out of those 1,000, more white people died. Second, black people. But let's get down to the real number that we're concerned about. Unarmed citizens who were killed by the cops. Out of 350 million people, 25 people out of 350 million people were killed by the cops who were unarmed. Everybody else who were killed by the cop were armed with a gun, knife, or a car. Only 25 citizens were killed who were unarmed. And out of those 25 people, 14 of them were African American or Black American. That's a lot. That's too many. I get it. But it ain't no genocide. Just not true. Okay? Now listen to me. Black people are not privileged to this information because there is a political group called the Democratic Party who are invested that black people believe this and hire them into office. They will tote this untrue line that there's a genocide of going on black people by the cops. Now, here you are, a black man, and you're told this, and you believe it's true, and the media supports it by only showing the interactions with cops that are negative, you're going to get pulled over. Well, what are you doing? You haven't done anything wrong, but you're fearing for your life. Because you were told a lie that cops hate you, they are racist, and they want to commit genocide on you. So when they put you in handcuffs, what do? If you believe what they say, how can you not fight for your life? This happened recently. A man who fell asleep in the driveway of a fast food joint. I don't forget which one it was. He fell asleep. He was drunk. Cops took him out and said, "Hey, you got to go to jail for this. It's beyond our ability. We can't let you go drunk. You're already in the car. This happens to white people. This happens to black people. This happens to Hispanic people and Asian people. If you're caught with the key in the ignition, you're going to get a DUI and you're going to go into the can to sober up." Happens to everybody. But this black guy, which I believe may not be true, there's a certain level of responsibility he has to take, but he's drunk. But if he believed that lie, that this could be his life, how do you not run? How do you not fight? It is the Democratic Party and Black Lives Matter who tells black people this lie that makes them believe that they have to fight for their life when they don't have to, because statistically it is 100% untrue. And Black Lives Matter and the Democratic Party and people who believe this have to take a level of responsibility for the deaths that are caused by black citizens who believe their life is at threat because of the police. And it doesn't help their community. And it puts the chips on the shoulder of black people, because how are you going to respect people who are trying to commit genocide on you, right? It is part of their behavior that gets them in trouble. But how do you not get in trouble? How can you be nice to people who you feel are going to kill you? Right? But my friends, it's untrue. 1,000 people out of 350 million people is not a genocide. 14 black citizens killed unarmed is not a systematic killing of your race. It's not. Actually, the numbers, one is too many, but the number overall is good. It shows that most cops do their jobs well. Now, there's another statistic that has not come up. How many people feel harassed by cops? I bet that number is way higher. And one is too many, like I said before. But let's not over-exaggerate. And this is a lesson I've been teaching since, for the last 20 years. Whatever you exaggerate, you weaken. As a political movement, Black Lives Matter, as they spill this vile lie, ultimately undermines their own political purpose, because they're exaggerating. And I think exaggerating will get more people on their side. No, people hunger for the truth, and they won't appreciate over-exaggeration, especially if it ends up with social unrest. This cop who killed George Floyd should get the death penalty, as far as I'm concerned. I don't believe in making excuses for bad cops one iota, and I blame the system that allows them to hire such people, and I blame his contemporaries who watched him do that and did nothing about it. There needs to be a culture in the police department that doesn't protect bad cops, but protects the citizen. And realize that bad cops give good cops a bad reputation. But let's not exaggerate. There is not a genocide. There is not a genocide perpetrated on the black people. And Black Lives Matter, Look, you can go on the internet right now, and you can see hundreds of recordings of police abusing their power, violating people's constitutional rights, and it covers all gamuts of race, religion, and creed. It's a problem, and this needs to be fixed. And we can all unify by that. But Black Lives Matter, they're not about black lives. They're about power. Because they're not about black lives. They're only about the black lives that extend their political power. Because if they were for Black Lives Matter, they would be concerned about all Black Lives Matter. The black lives that died during the riots and the looting. But they don't say nothing about that. They don't talk about the thousands killed by black on black crime in places like Chicago and all over our nation. They don't mention that even once. They don't care about the black lives that are aborted all over this country. There's been a couple of years where there were more babies, black babies, aborted than born in New York City. That's a fucking crime. That's a genocide perpetrated upon themselves. You don't hear nothing. You don't hear nothing from Black Lives Matter about those statistics because they're not about all black lives. They're only about the black lives that are killed by cops because there's an access to political power. So let me coin a new phrase. All Black Lives Matter. All Black Lives Matter. Not just the ones that are killed by cops, but the ones that were killed during the looting, the ones that killed every day through black on black crime. Yes, even the ones that are killed by white people, the ones that are aborted in cities like New York. There's a couple years here and there where there are more black babies aborted than born in New York City. That's a fucking crime. That's a genocide committed upon your own race. And if your white liberal friend thinks that's okay, run from that fucker. Because with friends like that, who needs enemies? If you're truly going to be for black lives that matter, it's got to be all lives. All the lives. Whether they're politically expedient for you or not. And might be against your political values. If not all black lives matter, then no one's really going to take you seriously in the long run. And they're going to see through it. And and one thing I do agree upon of them, saying that all lives matter doesn't help. Not all lives need the attention. There are certain groups of races that are doing very well in the United States, like Asians, Indian Americans, not Native Americans, Indian Americans. They're doing well. Black people are not doing well in our society today. And saying that all lives matter doesn't quite solve the problem. Let me tell you something. If a pipe broke underneath your house and you and your friend went down there to fix it and you say, oh, hey, that's the pipe that's broken. Let's fix it. And your friend says, why? All pipes matter. You're like, what? Yeah, all pipes matter. And you say, but that's the one that's broken. Doesn't matter. All lives matter. All pipes matter. You got to treat all the pipes the same. That's unrealistic, and it doesn't address the problem. Right now, black people need more attention. But it may not be the attention that they want. It should be the attention that they need. The top problems that the black community are facing right now are not cops. It's a culture that doesn't value being a father that stays in the home. 70% of the black population doesn't have a father in the home. And there are consequences to that. Socially, emotionally, and economically. Black on black crime. Abortion, like I mentioned before. The best way to maintain political power is to have a healthy birth rate. But white liberals convinced black people that they shouldn't bring their babies into such a hard world, but they're keeping theirs. They're having their babies. That's racist. And at the end of the day, the cultures that take responsibility for their own actions, that fathers and mothers take responsibility for their children's future, end up being economically and emotionally fit. And black people clearly have an uphill battle. You see, Hispanic people have roots. Asian peoples have roots to China. Italian Americans have roots to Italy. French people have roots to French, and German have roots to Germany. But black people were taken from where they were. They don't know where they came from. They don't have the luxury of bringing their culture with them. Their culture was destroyed, and then suddenly they got free, which was great. But they said, "Fucking figure it out." Well, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. And we need to acknowledge how hard it is to create your own culture that was never yours. But the fact of the matter is, they still got to take responsibility for it, because other races don't have the answers for them, and the government doesn't have answers to them. They're going to have to make the answers for themselves. And part of that is taking personal responsibility for your own actions, having a culture that values fathership, having a culture that values education, having a culture that values entrepreneurship. They got to take the reins into their own hands. Stop depending upon this white government to be its white savior. It's not going to happen. It doesn't know how to make you prosperous. You know how to make yourself prosperous. Learn from other people and other races how to be prosperous, because that's what it is. It's about prosperity. And if it's your mindset that's keeping you from being prosperous, and there's a political group trying to make you believe it's not your mindset, it's everything around you, it's the system that's keeping you oppressed, then why would you even try? And therefore you don't. Let me tell you something. If you went to school and they didn't teach you how to balance a checkbook, how to make good credit, the value of owning property, the value of knowing how the stock market works, and the value of education, the system's not rigged against you. You have been rigged against the system. You have been taught to go against the flow of how this country creates prosperity, and that is through capitalism. Stop hating capitalism. Get a surfboard, and ride the wave of capitalism into prosperity and eventually political power. And yes, black people have a harder mountain to climb, but the work needs to be done regardless. And you are the masters of your own destiny. I have no doubt in my mind that African Americans, black Americans, whatever they want to be called, can accomplish anything in this country. But if a certain political mindset gets to them first to tell them don't even try, because the system's rigged against you, and the only way you can do it if you vote for me, they've been hoodwinked. They've been swindled. They've been okey-doked, as Barack Obama would put it. Another thing, you constantly hear people say that we have excessive incarceration rates, like these people didn't commit the crime that they did. People need to realize that black on black crime is a problem. And at the end of every black prisoner is a black victim pressing charges. Is a black mother whose son was killed by a black gang member supposed to not press charges because there's so much black on black incarceration? Well, fuck that. They deserve justice. People say if you pull the cops out of the community, there'll be less people going to jail. Doesn't mean there'll be less victims. There'll be more victims. That's what's not being said. If there's no cops to prosecute, you're just left to fend for yourself by evil people who will take advantage. Evil people are looking for opportunities to do something and get away with it free. Not having to work a hard day's work, not having to be an entrepreneur, but just victimize people and get things the easy way. If there's no cops, who's going to tell? Right? So having less people going to jail because there's no cops doesn't mean there's less crime. Like I said, 90% of the violent criminals in jail, there were black people on the other side pressing charges. Let me tell you something. One of the most dangerous people in our society are young men. They're probably the most dangerous. They're full of testosterone, no check on their emotions, all have something to prove. And if they were in a tribe, it would all be good because they'll probably take their angst out on a competing tribe, trying to take their resources. But that's not what we have in our society. They're supposed to sit down and in a cubicle and learn stuff with all this testosterone flowing through their brains. And the only stopgap against foolish men are wise fathers. And if your community has a low fathership rates, it will mirror the incarceration rates and the violent rate in your community. The statistics are undeniable. People like to point to a different thing, but the statistics are so overwhelming. You just sound like a fool when you try to insist it's a different problem. No, low fathership rates are the major problem of why men who make up most of who are incarcerated don't have fathers. There's a correlation, clear correlation. And we need in our society to value father and being a father. And to relay the messages from a father who survived his own angst and his own testosterone-filled moment in society and gotten through it without going to jail or dying. We need that type of wisdom upon the kids today. 70% low fathership rates in the black community. Unacceptable. I have no problem listening to rap. But if your goal in life is to screw everything and not be there as a father, then you got a character flaw. I get it. Men are stimulated by what we see, and there's always someone more beautiful coming around the corner. You can give in to that stimulation and alienate your family and your children. Abandon your daughter and son and your wife. Go right ahead. But don't expect to be applauded for it or to think you're a virtuous man. You're not. You're a quitter. And you're ruled by your emotions and not by your logic. Don't get me wrong, it's not all men's fault. Some women are just too much. And our culture has taught them not to respect men. And then they want to know why men don't stick around. Because they can't or unwilling to give the respect to them no matter what they do. And women must take a certain level of responsibility for that. Because there's nothing a man has done in his life that deserves to be with someone who makes him miserable, right? And vice versa, right? And to feel that you don't have to treat someone with respect, then why you're wasting your time with them? But if you wish that they stay and just eat your disrespect, well, guess what? That shit ain't happening. There's no woman that is so beautiful that you will take that abuse ad infinitum. Truly. Unless your relationship is built on a foundation of love and respect, guess what? You'll get tired of fucking anybody. There's a saying. Look at a hot girl, and I'll show you a guy that's tired of fucking her. What that is saying, if there's nothing built other than sexuality, they'll get tired of you, no matter how beautiful you are. And vice versa. Well, not truly. Some women will stay with bad men, no matter what they do. They'll keep on coming back. And the reasons for that is another podcast. And one thing more about interactions with police. You know what? I've been, as a Hispanic man, pulled over about 3 times. One was a group of my friends who were all cholos, and we all got set to the corner on the curb, and we got our hands cuffed, and they interrogated us, whatever. One was my brother. They pulled us over because he has a history of crime. Right? About 3 in my life. And one other, just because they pulled me over, I looked suspicious. But 2 of them, I was hanging around the wrong element. I wasn't doing crime, but I was hanging around people who did. And that put me in a situation where I was going to meet a cop or other criminals. My brother, on the other hand, he's had about 20 interactions with cops. He increased his possibility of meeting a bad cop because he was always doing something wrong. He was a criminal. And his interactions with cops were higher. Now, if he met a cop that decided to kill him for whatever reason that is against the law, that cop should go to jail for the rest of his life. But my brother put himself in that circumstance by increasing his opportunity to meet a bad cop. Doing crime in general increases you with the opportunity of meeting bad criminals that could shoot you just because they don't like you. There's a level of responsibility that you need to take. And I realized that early. So I didn't hang around my friends anymore. And I distanced myself from them. And I wouldn't give my brother that many rides anymore. Because I wanted my interactions with criminals and cops to be low. I took that responsibility. And so can everybody else. Don't do crime, and you'll have less interactions with cops. Most black people are law-abiding citizens, and it's completely impossible not to have interactions with cops. It just happens. But if they're law-abiding, it is way less than someone who's living a life of crime. And that's just a fucking fact. George Floyd did not deserve to die. And it was a criminal offense to murder him in cold blood. There's nothing he did that deserved him being killed without due process. I do believe in the death penalty, but he didn't kill anybody. That's here or there. But the fact of the matter is, he lived a life of crime. He increased his opportunities to meet a fucked up cop. And he finally did. You look at his rap sheet, he's had about 15 altercations with cops. He had to deal with cops 15 times because he was doing criminal activity. There's a level of responsibility he has to take for that. He can't now. And just like that cop needs to take responsibility for his actions and will and should go to jail for life, I think he should get the death penalty because I don't think anybody's above the law. And I think if you don't have a society that doesn't have a death penalty, people will devalue life and risk their own life and other people's life if the only punishment is jail time. I think when you kill in cold blood, you give up the right of your own life. George Floyd increased his opportunity to meet a bad cop by being someone who was consistent at breaking the law. There's nobody who can take responsibility of that other than him. And he can't now. Little comfort to George Floyd now that he's dead, that this cop's going to jail for the rest of his life. He's dead. None of it's worth it. So beyond politics and beyond people taking offense, let me tell you something right now and hear me clearly. Don't do crime. Only bad things come from it. And unfortunately, we live in a time where not only bad things can come from criminals, they can also come from cops. And your best way to avoid it might be impossible to avoid, but the best way to avoid it is being a good law-abiding citizen. We are not in the 50s where you walk peacefully down the street and they sick dogs on you and beat you with billy clubs. That's not the society we live in anymore. You can avoid your interactions with cops by being a law-abiding citizen. You can't avoid them altogether, but you can avoid them. George Floyd has multiple offenses. He put a gun to a pregnant woman's head while he was robbing her house. I don't believe he deserves to have the state execute him on the street. Absolutely not. He should have had his day in court, and that cop took the law in his own hands, and he should pay the price too. He's not above it. But we have to be real. We have to look for real solutions. And making George Floyd a martyr won't help your situation. It only serves to undermine it. We can all unify around the idea that the police need to be reined in, and that we should defund them. That's craziness. We need more money to put more eyes on them, put them through more training to weed out those bad cops, and learn how to hire the right mindset and modalities that create a great cop that doesn't react to a citizen that may not be giving them the respect that they feel they need, so they want to abuse them. It takes a special mindset. We need to figure out what that mindset is. And that's going to take more money, people, not less money. Because a society without cops is a dangerous society. Let me tell you something. Why people are not going to kick the cops out of their neighborhoods? And neither should black people. Of course, the prosecution rates will go down because there'll be no cops to prosecute, to catch the criminals. Of course it's going to go down if there's less cops. People think that the majority of black incarceration is due to cops pulling over people, finding drugs, and throwing them into jail. That ain't true. Most of the crimes done by black Americans that lead to imprisonment are violent crimes perpetrated on other black people, who then press charges on those people. And having the bigotry of low expectation by white liberals that says they can't do it, they don't have that kind of emotional control or that kind of logic, is racist. Black people can do anything a white man can do, regardless if he's poor, regardless what kind of family he came from. He can still, if he worked hard, have the great results. Not going to all have the same results. That's unrealistic. I wouldn't tell a white man he's going to play as good as LeBron. That'd be stupid. But if it's based on intellect and charisma, black people can do what white people can do. Barack Obama proved that. So don't let anybody tell you what you can do, what is possible for you. Barack Obama knew, like at the age of 10, that he was going to be president of the United States. He didn't let the negative rhetoric that it's a white power structure and they won't let you succeed, that they'll stop you, that you don't have the right color. He didn't let none of that stop him fulfilling his dream. He had the audacity not to believe the victimization peddled by white liberals. He knew that he was charismatic, intelligent, and personable, and he can sway the American people, and he did for 8 years. So don't let anyone tell you what you can or cannot do. This idea that we should take down all the negative history of the United States is so foolish. Those statues are there to remind us that certain people had it wrong, and they paid a price for it. We shouldn't get rid of our negative history because we'll be doomed to repeat it. I mean, and for those black people who want to put slavery back into white people's faces, I don't know how taking down all the history of that serves to fulfill that process. I mean, you're going to go, hey, you guys committed slavery. Oh, yeah? What proof do you have of that? You burned everything. You took down all the statues of everybody who did that. So how do I know it's true? Good thing about America, we don't hide our bad history. It's right up there with our good history. And a good history it is. We should take credit as a nation for ending slavery. We didn't invent it. It only could last at the formation of our country about 100 years. And then it's been abolished. There were still countries all around the world that had slavery for thousands of years. We shouldn't take the responsibility of creating it, but we should take the responsibility for ending it. Hundreds of thousands of men died to free black slaves, and hundreds and thousands of men died because they wanted to keep them as slaves. That's a big price to pay. And I won't act like it didn't happen. Of course, black people had it tough, and they had it tougher than any white man to try to rebuild themselves, of course. And they probably should have got reparations for slavery at that time. But taking down our history by destroying our past, good and bad. Yeah, the men who created this country were not perfect. Were flawed. They were men that did great things. They could have been great men like John Adams, who was an abolitionist. He believed freedom was for everybody. That's a great man. But George Washington, Thomas Jefferson were men who did great things that were flawed because they owned slaves. I just give more praise to people like John Adams, who were abolitionists, who lived their principles. Not people who wished for a better world but didn't do nothing to change it themselves concerning slavery. But they should get the credit for writing the documents and signing the documents that would eventually end killing slavery in the Western world. They should get the credit for that. But I'm not going to pretend they didn't own slaves. That's pretty stupid. People say that George Washington was an honest man, and that's great. But I would have had him be less honest and have no slaves. I just think being a slave owner is worse than being a constant liar. They're both not great attributes, but if I had to put them on the weight scale of what is worse, clearly having slaves was worse. But I won't pretend they did not play a big part in creating the greatest nation on God's green earth. And that's not the perfect nation on God's green earth, because people are involved in that and it will never be perfect. But we always strive. We always push towards being a better society. That's the American story. That we're always constantly trying to fix our shit. Other nations just don't do that. They try to solidify and hold on to these bastions of negativity. We as Americans, we try to better ourselves. And those who hold these antiquated ideas like racism become fewer and fewer in our society. That's all we can hope for. So I don't think we should get rid of our history, the good and the bad, the dichotomy of people doing great things and also doing bad things, looking at things that redeem them and things that are unredeemable. We need to be a much more thoughtful society and not try to hide everything under the cover, good, bad, or indifferent. We can honor these men for what they did and pity them at the same time for not being able to live their principles. That's the story of being human. Having a life filled with regret and brilliance. We must give up the political ideology of unforgiveness. We have all made mistakes. We have all lived a life that sometimes we were proud of and sometimes we were ashamed of. We all have reacted wrongly to certain circumstances, and we've all acted perfectly to a circumstance. But to go back and attack people for the mistakes they made in the past that they clearly regret will only serve to divide our country. If you want forgiveness for what you have done, you must extend that forgiveness to everyone else if they're truly sorry for what they have done or believe or said. We must be and have been a society that if you are willing to make the changes, we will forgive you. Once you're square with the house and you paid your dues in jail, you are forgiven. That's the only way the society works. You know, the greatest thing about humans, it's also the saddest, that we burn bright for a while and then we're gone. Some people burn brighter than others. So I ask you, how bright will you burn? Are you going to burn with hate and unforgiveness? Or are you going to burn with forgiveness, empathy, and understanding? Choice is yours. Make good choices. It is that simple. And if you don't know what choice to make, then get educated about the choices that lie before you. It's that simple, my friends. Don't do crime. It is actually easier to live a life as a proper citizen than a life of crime. I really know nobody who's ever been successful at a life of crime. Very few. And everyone who thought they were the few that I know of, they were all wrong. They went to jail. So I say all lives matter, not just the ones that die at the hands of cops. I say keep up our good and bad history to remind people that we can definitely get back to what is bad if we are not cautious enough. And the best form of self-help is taking personal responsibility for your actions. And the culture that needs to change for everyone is the value of personal responsibility towards your citizen, personal responsibility towards your family, and personal responsibility towards yourself. That is the apex of intellectual thought. Any intellectual thought that has you divert your responsibility to someone else or some kind of process or government handicaps you to make the changes needed in your life. So, as we conclude, my fellow Americans, if you want to follow me on my social media platforms, you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube. Just type in James Salazar Media. I should come up. Subscribe to all my social media platforms and subscribe to this podcast and leave a review if you like what I said. And surely email if you think I'm full of shit about anything I said. Or you think I'm not just getting it right. Definitely put it in an email. I will address it. I will answer it. I would just get so happy if I got something like that. So, my friends, when the storm of life comes against you and you find yourself on your knees, you stand up and you stand tall and look at that storm and say what my sensei Jack Burton always says: give me your best shot. Strike the music.